I see. There's Luis. Hello, Luis.
Buenas tardes.
Felices días. Es como se dice en España, ¿no? Felices días, más o menos.
Feliz fiestas.
Hola.
Hola.
Estás muted.
¿Cómo en España, cómo se dice durante este periodo? ¿Es felices días?
Felices fiestas.
Felices fiestas. Ok.
Felices fiestas, sí.
Muy bien.
Sí.
Luis, I think you're muted. Can't hear
No?
you.
I wasn't Luis.
No, no te
Ah.
escuchamos, Luis.
It's Paxi.
Ask. Unmute. Hi.
I was
Okay.
saying that to be a little bit more precise, we say Feliz Navidad.
Feliz.
Okay.
Bueno,
Eso es
como yo
very
he
similar to Merry
recibido
Christmas.
un mensaje de una española que dice felices días a mí.
I mean, it's okay, well, it's not very common,
Okay.
but probably she wanted to expand your happiness more days.
It's a very good thing. I support that. Well, whatever you guys say in whatever country you're in, I hope you had a nice Christmas holiday, and the next coming days will be nice despite the lockdowns and confinamientos and COVID and
I think in 14 days from today, 14 days more or less, we will have an increase in new cases.
Oh, you think?
Oh, for sure.
From people celebrating
from people.
together.
Yes, gathering.
Together.
Yes.
Yeah. I heard in the United States, despite all the restrictions, there were record numbers of people in airports still traveling. So hopefully it's not so, but it probably will be. Yeah.
Because I'm a little concerned about these variants, the English version, the South African one. It's like we're going to need many vaccines, maybe. I don't know.
We have to wait.
Yeah, well, at least we have our practice, right? I mean, seriously, we can sit and be safe. And in fact, what we're going to talk about after the sit, right action, will continue on the factor of right action. A lot of what the Buddha was, I think, had in mind, or what the experts believe he had in mind, was creating safety. Creating safety in our lives, not having to worry about people stealing from us, killing us. There's one also about sexuality, which will be interesting to talk about. But I think it was really about creating a sense of safety, because boy, it's really hard to sit when you don't feel safe, right? When you're nervous, when you're scared, it's very hard to be able to relax into the present moment. So important, I think, to have that need met, that need for safety. And right now it's very challenging times. We go outside and it's not particularly safe, and it may not appear safe. People don't have their masks on, they get close.
But you know what? The number of normal flu incidents has been is very lower than that in previous years. And that is because we have the mask.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think it's because of the mask, and also we're not even interacting nearly as much. And there's been other crazier side effects. For instance, in the United States, and this is really sad what I'm going to say, but there's been a tremendous drop in school killings of students. It's because they're not at school to shoot, but it's like, oh, more students have survived because they're at home. It's very sad. Yeah. So I think the overall deaths have not gone up as a result of COVID, because in other areas they've gone down, while in COVID, of course, they've gone up. Very unusual consequences, some very good, some, kind of crazy.
We have in Spain, we have a saying that goes, no hay mal que por bien no venga. Siempre el mal viene acompañado de alguna cosa buena.
Siempre. Bueno, es posible, ¿no? Es posible.
Sí,
La vida es muy interesante. Well, we will practice, right? We can always practice, can always start again. And yeah, I'm just trying to feel into what I feel drawn to, what sort of twist, what sort of extra practice to give in the final 10 minutes, as we usually do. I think I'm just this will be my regalo, no? Is whatever you want to do. We'll just practice for 30 minutes, and whatever draws you, whatever you feel called to do, you can do. I'll add a little expression of that as we get towards the 10-minute to go mark after 20 minutes. But yeah, feel free to practice as you want. Let's make sure everybody's muted. Looks like I'm going to mute Paxi, Nuria. Okay. So, yeah, let's find comfortable posture. One that hopefully reminds you of what you are intending to do. Right, a posture that is familiar when you practice. So much of this practice is about creating healthy habits. We might call it even muscle memory. So if you feel comfortable and like to practice on a cushion or in a chair, maybe you're on your couch or your bed, find that comfortable, stable posture, that noble posture. And sometimes that's all we need to do, is to just get into that posture, and the body and the mind, they know what to do. They're reminded, okay, we're going to practice being mindful for a while, practice being present. So maybe using whatever tool or anchor you use to arrive into this moment. Maybe it's sensations in the body, or the weight of the body, the points of contact felt in the body. And at any time, you notice your mind has wandered off or is thinking about something, the past, the future. This is a moment of celebration because we are awake again. We are in the present moment again. And we can choose to let the thought go, come back to the present moment through the body, the sensations, or maybe you can use the breath as an anchor. So let's find the breath if you haven't already. Just noticing it, maybe in the belly, the movement of the belly, the chest, or as the air passes through the nostrils. And if you're feeling a little sleepy, I know for many of you it's late in the afternoon. It's often recommended that we pick a more narrow spot as an anchor, such as the tip of the nose, tip of the nostrils, to try to generate some energy with that singular focus. But if you're feeling a little anxious or there's lots of energy in the body, sometimes recommended to have a broader anchor, such as the whole body, the posture. And if you're really sleepy, you can always open your eyes. And if the mind is very distracted, lots of papancha, lots of jumbly thought in there, you might try using hearing or listening as an anchor. Receptively waiting for sounds to enter into the hearing sphere, into the sense of hearing. Not chasing anything, but just letting it come to you. So choosing one of these three anchors, posture, breath, or sounds, and using one of them to calm the mind, center the mind, bringing the attention back again and again, gently but firmly, without judgment, with curiosity, with kindness. Arriving again and again into this present moment. if it's helpful or supportive for your practice, you can use labels, labeling or naming your experience as it happens. For instance, breathing in or inhaling, exhaling, or if with the body, sensing, feeling. When you notice thoughts, thinking, simply say thinking, returning, returning, inhaling, exhaling. hopefully your mind is a little more settled, centered. And so if you like, in these final 10 minutes or so of our formal practice, if you want to try something different, maybe you can do a form of vipassana or insight meditation where you just notice the comings and goings of whatever arises into your consciousness, letting whatever arise be your anchor until it passes or until another thing arises more obvious. Or maybe you could try the open awareness, knowing awareness, just noticing whatever the mind is aware of, a clear knowing, sounds, sensations, thoughts. Or stay with the samatha practice, the centering practice. Whatever you feel called to do, you could even do metta, loving kindness phrases. Whatever you think would be most supportive for you at this moment. So good. So no matter wherever your attention has been, let's come back to the body, to an embodied awareness, embodied presence. Reconnecting with whatever sensations you might notice. Maybe now there are body parts sleeping, tingling, maybe even a little discomfort here and there, but we just notice it. Reground into the present moment through the body. And then bringing the awareness into the heart center, the chest area. And thanking yourself for your practice, for your willingness to care for yourself and others in this way. Not always easy to do. And recalling that there are others on this call doing the same, practicing for their well-being and the well-being of all beings. Thanking them for that. And imagining you can extend your awareness, tap into that universal consciousness, you might say, and embrace everybody on this call and beyond. Just imagining your awareness, your consciousness could go out in all directions without limit. And then when you hear the sound of the bell, just noticing whatever arises in the mind or in the body. Just another opportunity to be present. Well, thank you all for your practice and practicing with us. Not only does it feel like a gift, a privilege, but it also, I think, at least for me, it helps me stay close, to the Dharma, to the Dhamma, to the teachings. I think that was one of the first things I noticed when I first started leading the meditations in Madrid, 5 years ago, was how much closer I felt to the teachings and how I just, really just dove in. It was very nice. And even though I really had no business probably teaching and still don't, just the motivation, that extra motivation was just what I needed. And with that, we'll just keep on keeping on with the Noble Eightfold Path. I just don't think there's any way we could go wrong. And I was sort of thinking of what Luis said about this Spanish saying, which if I got it wrong, please correct me, but it sounded like with everything that arises bad or mal, something good arises. Was that, Luis, how it is? And I like that very much, and I believe that's true. The opposite I don't think is true. With everything that good arises, something bad also arises. I don't think that is true. But the first one, I believe that, it's we can always learn. There's always a teaching, it seems like, in everything, including in the mal, in the bad. So at a minimum, we learn, we gain wisdom, we gain experience. And I think very much what Buddhism is about for me, on a practical level, right, is about cultivating the good. And there really is no downside to that I can think of. Now, there's parts of me, that are not so good, right? I grew up with some very strange messages from my parents and from society, and I have some very strange thoughts sometimes. And that part of me resists going to the good. Like I think of Anna Monica, she's like pure in comparison to me, right? She is like so good in comparison to me. And sometimes she'll get into the pure farther than I can imagine going, right? And there's a part of me that's like, ooh, and then I resist. But this doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means that there's causes and conditions in me that are not accustomed to that level of purity, that level of ethical and moral behavior. Just, I remember the first time I stole something, and we're going to talk about this because this is one of the factors, right, of right action is not to steal. First time I stole something and got caught, and they called the police. I was just a kid. And my dad came to get me. Fortunately, they didn't take me to jail. The police just held me. My dad came to the store. And then as he was taking me home, he said, look, if you're going to steal, just don't get caught. It's like, what kind of message is that, right? Not a very good message. Just don't get caught. It's okay to steal, but you don't get caught. So that's a very good example of the kind of messages that I receive. And I do also believe through just my experience, my observation, what I've read, that we can't just change on a dime. That's an expression, right? We just can't change like that, just immediately. It takes time. And maybe in one lifetime, if we're lucky, maybe we can change, 20%, 30%. Very hard to imagine, changing 100%. And there's a quote, Joseph Goldstein in his mindfulness book quotes a Burmese monk that says, I don't want to get it wrong. It says 4 words, but I can't remember the first one. So I want to make sure I get it right. Sudden, de repente, sudden awakening, gradual cultivation. Sudden awakening, gradual cultivation. And I think this connects us now to what we were talking about last week when we were talking about that we abstain from killing. How does that play into what we eat, right? Whether we eat animals, whether we eat sentient beings. I think what they're trying to say, this is from this Burmese monk, that we might have an awakening where we realize, this is contributing to the killing of animals, which is something we want to abstain from. But the cultivation of it in our lives might be gradual. Like I think Javier's not on the call today, but last week he was talking, oh, there he is. Oh, hi, Javier. He was talking about how he has a difficulty of letting go completely of the eating of fish, which he does a couple times a week. But to me, the way I looked at that, that's huge. If you're just doing to me, it's just, right? If you're just eating fish twice a week, as compared to most people that every meal they're eating some animal, right? Pig or whatever it happens to be, that's a gradual cultivation. That is, I think, as much as we can hope for and expect. And I say it because I don't think it's helpful for us to be shitting on ourselves, right? This is a play on words, like shitting on mierda, no? Shooting, you shouldn't eat any animal, you bad person. That is not helpful either, right? Versus seeing the glass more half full, gosh, I'm only, right? Maybe having fish twice a week. This is a hell of a lot better than eating pig every day at every meal or whatever. Yeah, I've been listening to this French monk who, boy, this guy is so good. And his name is Matthew, right? Matthew Ricard?
Matthew.
Matthew Ricard. He's very famous because he's known, he's a writer as well, but he's known as being like the happiest man alive because of his practice. And it was another podcast. I love listening to these podcasts. And he said that it's much better to see the glass half full, or to be optimistic than to be pessimistic. He said this will lead to our happiness much more directly than if we're pessimistic. Even though we think, well, if I'm pessimistic, then I'll catch all these little things and I can maybe reach a level of perfection. No, it doesn't happen that way, right? If we're pessimistic, we're in the mal, we're in the negative, and how can we be happy? Right? It's almost a contradiction. And instead to see the good and to cultivate the good and just keep on going in that direction. Don't look where we don't want to go, look where we want to go. I guess that's another way to put it. Anyways, I am going to segue just a little bit to our right action. We were talking last week, there's 3 that the Buddha specifically mentioned. Thou shalt abstain from killing, taking the life of another. Thou shalt abstain from taking what is not yours or robbing. And thou shalt not commit sexual misconduct. So we talked about the taking of life last week. So I thought we would talk about the next 2. So I'll go to, first I got to push this button, right? Share screen. And then we'll go to Bhikkhu Bodhi's book, which, do you see Kindle? Okay. So everybody can see the book now, the pages in the book? Okay. So abstaining from taking what is not given. So I just highlighted what I thought was helpful. She says, taking what is not given means appropriating the rightful belongings of others with thievish intent. So much like the killing, the intent is very important. So if we take something that isn't ours, but it's totally an accident, that might not constitute, have the same karmic impact than if we have thievish intent. But it also implies a transgression, though not expressly stated, in withholding from others what should rightfully be given to them. This is very interesting, I think. And I also sort of interpret this as, this could include emotions. It could include love. It could include kindness. It could include compassion. And these are my thoughts. But like I can even see how a young child really deserves a certain amount of care, a certain amount of love, a certain amount of compassion and so forth. And maybe the parent withholds that and doesn't give it when the parent or when the child needs it. Or even society, when our politicos, when our politicians don't give. Especially now in COVID, we've got in the United States situation where the government was going to give everybody $600. suddenly the president decides, oh, that's not enough. So he won't sign the paper. So now the government can't give it. And to me, it's almost, that one almost feels a little bit like the government is sort of robbing the people in this way, withholding something that should be theirs. Going back to what the Buddha said, so they divided it, or he divided it pretty much in these 5 groups of either stealing, like pickpocketing, that type of thing, robbing, going into somebody's house, using force, obviously, that one would, or threats, snatching. This is interesting. They had a word specifically for snatching. It's taking something from somebody before they can resist. Very specific, right? Fraudulent, so this is falsely claiming that this is mine when it's not. And then deceitfulness, this is an interesting one. This is, of course, written 2,500 years ago, using false weights and measures to cheat customers. But we still see it, right? Like I get it in the store where sometimes if somebody thinks that maybe they can give me the wrong change, sometimes they do it. And I may not notice till later. I highlighted this thing about subjective state of the thief. That means that if the thief steals because of greed, they're wanting, they think more is better or whatever they want, versus hatred, in the Buddhist mind, they have different karmic consequences where hatred is worse than greed in this case. If we steal from somebody because we hate them, that would carry a heavier karmic consequence. Yeah, it says it right here. Between the two, acts motivated by hatred are comically heavier than acts motivated by greed. And then the opposite virtue, of course, is generosity. Right? It's giving what we have freely to others. This is possibly the antidote, you could even say, especially if, like for me, I did steal, especially as a young kid, and the giving is kind of my way of making an amend, you could say. Okay, so maybe we'll just stop here for a second on the stealing. Now, these are Bhikkhu Bodhi. One thing I like about Bhikkhu Bodhi is he's a translator of the Pali. So he goes to the Pali texts, which are what we believe to be the original teachings of the Buddha. They were memorized for 200-300 years and then finally written down in Sri Lanka in this language Pali, which they think is what the Buddha spoke. And it's considered to be a more, not language of the street, but it's of the commoner. The Pali language was more of the common people in the area where the Buddha lived versus, say, Sanskrit, which is a little more educated language, a little more sophisticated. But so Bhikkhu Bodhi reads from the Pali and he tells us what he thinks the Pali is saying, right? But then we have 2,500 years of commentary, people who have added, including some amazing teachers, that were very notably wise in their own right, that have added, bringing us right to today, and where we've had teachers like Thich Nhat Hanh, where the definition is kind of expanded. It's kind of changed to be even more applicable, you might say. And to really get pure with it, I've heard it even said that if something is not actually given, if I don't say like, here, take my phone, then it's really not available. And so this is something that Anna Monica and I have talked about, like even you could find something out in the street where it doesn't look like it's there, there's somebody that owns it in the vicinity or whatever, but it looks like it could be of value to just pick it up. In the early polytext, they said that's fine. But it is kind of expanded, and I think in the Thich Nhat Hanh tradition, where even there, you probably shouldn't pick it up. It wasn't freely given to you by somebody. And I think what this kind of points to me is we really have to feel, inside ourselves, does this feel right? Is this consistent with what we believe we want to do?
Can I give an example?
Okay, go ahead.
A quick example. So we live in a neighborhood where people don't leave things of value out. There's a lot of garbage on the streets. And I saw walking by one day a tanka in this neighborhood that was on a fence.
There's a tanka right there on the wall.
That's not the one I'm referring to, but there was one on a fence between houses, no sign, just draped over a fence. And to me, someone had left it for someone to take because it wasn't attached. It was just hung over, and it was gorgeous and to my eye. So I ran it through this filter, and I thought it was somebody left it so someone could take. So I took it thinking it was for someone to take, and I brought it home very excitedly because it was this royal blue, and Jim loves tankas, and guess what luck. This beautiful thing was left, and I think it was for someone who would appreciate it to take, and here it is. And by Jim's filter, it was not okay to have taken it. It was just a little too unclear. Go put it back was how it sat with him. So I did. I took it back, and a few hours later, it was gone again. Someone had taken it. But that's the subjective, I think, because by my filter, I thought it was okay to take, and to Jim's, it wasn't. So I don't know what the moral is there, but.
Well, I think, it kind of came to me that maybe the moral is because of my childhood of stealing, where I probably didn't stop stealing from stores and so forth until I was maybe 30. Maybe my karma is I need to be extra careful and even to give more than take, to just purify that bad karma. I mean, it could have been that. I don't know, but it felt almost as clear in me that no, we can't take that, as it was in Anna Monica, that it's okay. So I guess the moral really is, or if there's not really moral, but is that it probably depends. It depends on the causes and conditions of the individual, that person's karma, what feels right? This is a practice of purification. And for some of us, we're dirtier, like me. My brain needs more cleaning or cleansing, right? It needs more purification. So, and we really need to keep our hearts in this conversation, I think. Is there anybody who would like to comment on this one before we move to the next one, which is the sexual conduct? Yeah, Nacho, please unmute yourself.
Yeah, I was just wondering if this is the right example, because for me, it's more like maybe in your subconscious feeling like you deserve something or feeling like you don't deserve something.
I think all these things can play a part. Absolutely. I mean, I love the title of one of the books of David Rico, a Buddhist and a Jungian psychologist. It's called When the Past is Present. When the past is present. And all the time, our past and even maybe our ancestors' pasts are present. Right? In how we perceive life, how we think, what we believe. And it's very possible it could be something like that, that I don't maybe deserve that, or someone doesn't deserve that, or I have too much already. There could be guilt. there could be lots of things. Yeah, lots of things. And I think the very best we could do is just try to be as true to ourselves as we can. And for me, I need something like Buddhism to give me what I call guardrails, to give me, some boundaries as to what is wholesome behavior. Because left to my own devices, oof, I'll be all over the place, and I just completed a very large business deal. I sold this business that I've been complaining about. Yep, I sold it. And we got into fights, me and the buyer, over money and stuff like that. And at times I was as ruthless and as greedy as I've ever been. And sometimes it took me a whole day to kind of calm down, and chill out and say, okay, fine. So yeah, absolutely, Nacho. All that stuff could be at play, and to honor it, and at least for me, and to try to look to a power greater than us, right? Like, to me, it's the teachings of the Buddha. This is so much more wholesome and healthy and sano than anything that comes out of my brain on its own. Yeah, thank you. So if you're willing, we'll go to the next one, which can be as interesting and maybe more so even. We might not finish it today, probably won't, but we can continue it next week. And this is around sexual actions or what is the word they use? Sexual misconduct. Thank you. Conduct. So I'll read the Bhikkhu Bodhi one. Of course, again, is the... Okay, so this is the third of the three of right action. Abstaining from sexual misconduct. So he writes, the guiding purpose of this precept from an ethical standpoint is to protect marital relations from outside disruption and to promote trust and fidelity within the marital union. Oh, I wanted to just remind that second one about the not taking what's not been freely given, or no stealing, a big reason for that was to create safety. And this is very similar, where it's to create trust and fidelity within the marital union so we can feel safe. Now, for monks and nuns, it goes all the way to there's no sexual conduct at all. I don't even believe with yourself. I think it's just, you renounce completely. But for lay people like ourselves, it's abstaining from sexual relations with an illicit, what they call an illicit partner. All right? So the illicit partner, it was funny, they defined it as for a man and then they defined it as for a woman. And this may or may not be applicable today, but I guess more or less it is. So for a man, there's three kinds of women, and I imagine men and men. One of the interesting things is the Buddha didn't seem to have any opinion about homosexual relations, although later commentaries had opinions about that, and we'll talk that a little bit more, about people who might have been like bisexual or whatever, but we'll get to that. But for now, this is heterosexual. So the three kinds of women a man would be considered illicit for a man is a woman who is married to another man. Okay, that seems pretty clear, right? That woman is married, so you shouldn't have sex with her. And probably just as much for yourself, you being the man, as for the other person, the other people. Don't want to harm them. A woman who is still under protection, so this means a child, one still living with their parents, or maybe even with their brother, with some kind of guardian. And then a woman prohibited by convention, so this would mean like your cousin, You don't want to have sex with your cousin or your sister, or with a nun, right? Or a woman, any woman who has a vow of celibacy, you want to honor that. And on the flip side, or for a woman, there's two kinds. For a married woman, any man other than her husband is considered a violation. And any man forbidden by convention, again, your cousin, a monk, something like that. So again, he just says, marital fidelity is what they're trying to strive for, being faithful. Yeah. So we'll stop there. So again, this has I don't know if expanded is the right word, but it has been, it's a little more nuanced now, or interpreted a little bit differently maybe. And maybe this could also be the Chinese text, because again, Bhikkhu Bodhi translating from the Pali text, and then there's people that translate from the Chinese text. The Sanskrit texts were mostly destroyed in India, so we don't have access to them as we do the Pali, which were in Sri Lanka, and the Chinese, which of course were in China. That it really has to do with any sexual act that may harm somebody. That's probably the best way to look at it. Would this and could this harm somebody, including myself, right? So if I have sexual relations outside of my partnership with somebody, I'm not going to feel good about that. And Monica's not going to feel good about that. And probably that other person isn't going to feel good about it. But it seems just really clear that it would be harmful and therefore is not considered wholesome conduct, would not comply. So then I did do a little bit of looking into, okay, what exactly is the Buddhist position on homosexuality or any, sort of non-traditional relationship. And in the old texts, it appears that they did have some views. It's kind of interesting on what was the word when you don't know if you're male or female? It's her.
You don't know?
Or you're both. You're both. Hermaphrodite. Hermaphrodite.
Hermaphrodite.
Hermaphrodite. Yeah, I always forget that word. Hermaphrodite. Which, yeah. So in that particular case, it's kind of interesting that they had a view on this. So if you're an hermaphrodite, which I guess is that you have both male and female, which I guess all of us do, but it's you're very unclear as to which one is stronger. You're kind of both, right? Male and female. You couldn't be ordained. You couldn't be ordained as a monk or a nun. And it also says that if you, they had a specific word for possibly lesbian, maybe, or transgender. That's what it was. Transgender. You also couldn't be ordained. But what's interesting is they had a caveat. You couldn't be ordained in this lifetime. So it doesn't mean you're finished. It just means in this lifetime, when you are hermaphrodite or you are transgender, you can't be ordained, but possibly in your next lifetime. And Ananda, who is was the Buddha's cousin, and he's the one that supposedly memorized all the teachings of the Buddha and then taught them after the Buddha died. Apparently, he was a transgender in an earlier life, but he became not only ordained, he became enlightened. I might have made a mistake there. Yeah, in the first case, this is just totally an aside, right? It's almost more like just a story. But in the case of the hermaphrodite, they couldn't be ordained. I think in the case of the transgender, they couldn't be enlightened. That's what it was. They weren't going to reach enlightenment in this lifetime as a transgender person, but they could in a following lifetime. And Ananda is an example of somebody who was a transgender in an earlier lifetime and then in his later lifetime, he became enlightened, which for him, it was at death. It was right before he died. So it was the very last moment. Anyways, all this is just kind of an aside. Of course, this stuff was written, 2,000 years ago. And anyways, I did like that nowhere does it say that a homosexual man or woman cannot be enlightened, and I believe also not be ordained. That did not seem to be the norm. So, yeah, that's our time. If there anybody who'd like to make a comment, I kind of think, if we want to talk about this more next week, we can, but maybe we're good. We can go on to Right Livelihood, but I'd love to hear what you think.
Hi, it's Robert here. I think, like you say, we kind of covered that, but I thought it was useful to talk about those outlooks, because for me they were just almost common sense and non-harming and deception, not carrying out any kind of deception, or it's really about honesty, really about being just generally honesty, but it's not terribly complex either. It's not hard to live that well. Okay, I'm not perfect, I'm not pure like Anna Monica, but it's not hard to grasp, I don't think.
Yeah.
Something to be worked on every day, but it's not. And I don't know. I just find it interesting because I grew up going to a different church on Sundays, and there are some similarities here in that we're talking, teachings and things from the past. But I'm just glad that there's an absence of negativity, I think, in a way, and saying that people are bad and you're bad,
othering.
People shouldn't be like this. They should do this. You should be fearful. You should be very fearful of God and that type of thing. So I find it quite interesting to listen to some of that stuff.
Yeah, I definitely prefer myself Buddhism over, say, Christianity, because there isn't this shaming sort of thing. It's a training type of practice. It's a cultivating. Even the word meditation that we use actually translated more literally means cultivate, to cultivate, right? And even around this thing around sexual misconduct, I know many people, and I can include myself in how I used to think, where it wouldn't even occur to me that having sex outside my marriage or with a married person would be wrong. Didn't even occur to me. That's how far out there we could be, right? So maybe we have that sudden awakening, where suddenly, boom, oh, it occurs to me, oh, you know what? Maybe that isn't such a good idea, right? And then we have our gradual cultivation where hopefully we start to abstain. Keeping our expectations realistic, right? Not having unrealistic expectations, because they're just not helpful. We want to have realistic expectations, keep cultivating it, and it grows. It gets easier and easier and easier.
It's a gentle practice.
It's a gentle practice, a continuous practice, and it builds up momentum. And I think of where my thinking is now, and it's like, oh my God, the way I used to think, it's like, geez. But I look at my cause and condition, that same dad, who told me don't get caught. He always had mistresses. Just like always. It didn't even occur to us that he wouldn't have a girlfriend, even though he lived in the house with my mother. So anyways, so let's, because we're at 11:46, unless there's someone else. Yeah, Nacho, please unmute yourself.
Yeah, I would say that, yeah, they're talking about married people, but we are in the 21st century where love is liquid, you know, and there are so many different kinds of sexual relationships or affective relationships. So I would say that what it is said in classic Buddhist text, and I would also have to say that gender roles have changed and we should be speaking of people instead of men and women. I don't think that this is very actual, and I don't think that this gives us a clear idea about what we should do and what we shouldn't be doing. And I think that we could talk a lot about how we could do self-harm to ourselves by having a lot of sex and things like that, you know. So I don't know. I don't feel like with this test, it's clear for me from a Buddhist point of view how to, what's the best way of having sex without harming myself and harming other people.
Yeah, I would agree. And, I was mentioning him to Anna Monica earlier, and she's like, like that. This was almost, I think, a study in, what the texts say. And you're right, they're not very helpful for today, the early text. And we do have more modern interpretations, like, for instance, in the Thich Nhat Hanh school, you might say, that is much more modern, much more reflective of how things are. And the harming part, I think, is the guiding principle. Is it causing us harm? And yes, we may not know right away what will or won't, but I can tell I'm not, Anna Monica and I are not legally married, but I can tell you it would be very harmful to her, to me, and to another person if one of us were to have sex outside of it without the permission of the other person. I mean, I just think that would be harmful. We don't need to be married to see that very clearly. And I think that should be the guiding principle. Is this causing harm? Is this gonna cause harm? We may fall into it by accident and find out, whoop, that doesn't work. So we don't do it again, hopefully. But I agree. In this particular area, look, in Buddhism, the path really is towards renunciation. So kind of in a way, if you really want to know what it is, it's towards renunciation. And the more we renounce the belief is, the better off we'll be. The more sexual relations you're having, even if they're healthy ones, I believe will cloud the mind. They will cloud the mind.
And I think today people define committed relationships differently. So that might be a better generic term. If you're in a committed relationship with 3 people, 2 people, open, but negotiated and understood within your group. And then, when you're outside the group, then that's when you're causing harm. But yeah, a negotiated, committed relationship, I think is how we could talk about it today. But also what you're saying, outside of a committed relationship, maybe there's sexual activity and then you negotiate that so there's not harm. But it's a practice. I would find it very hard to follow if I were still in my early 20s or something like that.
Yeah, Lara, go ahead.
Yeah, I suppose what we're talking about is actually we are reflecting on the purpose of these principles that were to protect a marital relationship. So is the society still trying to do that? And then if that's not the case, maybe the principles are no longer useful to serve that purpose.
I don't know that I understand. Say that again.
What I understood from the texts, the text that you read, is that the purpose of the principles were to protect a marital relationship.
Yeah, or to create, I would say to create safety.
Or to create safety, okay.
Yeah.
But if today that's not the goal that we have, if the goal that we have is, for example, personal fulfillment or being true to oneself as opposed to a relationship, then these principles might sound a bit that are not supported, So maybe what we're discussing is the goal more than the principles. I don't know if maybe I'm not making sense.
Yeah,
It makes sense in my head.
You know, I can see, you might even say kind of conflicting sort of goals. And I will say, and maybe what we should do, because it is past our time, why don't we pick this up next week? Well, we could talk again about it. But I'll just add one last thing. You know, there are Buddhist schools, Buddhist branches that have taken this really far, you know, where to me they've gone off the plantation, right? Is what we say. They've like the I think it's called the Diamond Buddhism, or there's a chapter in Madrid, and that one is like free sex, you know. And then there's another Tibetan, well, quite a number of Tibetan kind of branches where sex with teacher and student is permitted. I mean, it can get really weird. And to me anyways. And so I'm not sure that there is a general consensus. What I like to believe and what I've been taught really is it's around this harming. So maybe what we'll do, just in the interest of time, we'll leave it there, and then we'll bring it back up. And if you find anything you want to share next week around this, please do that. Yeah, we could continue. Oh, Rasa, did you want to say something, or?
Oh, saying goodbye.
Okay, yeah. So we'll do a quick metta practice to close out. And yeah, and then we'll still have time to open it up to small groups afterwards if you're interested. Okay, so just coming back to the body, especially for me after all those words, you got to come back to the body. Maybe feel into the chest area, the heart center. So offering some good wishes to myself and then to others. And you can repeat these to yourself. May I be happy. May I be well. May I be safe. May I live with ease. And let's do for our second group, how about the Sangha, our Sangha, using the we. May we be happy. May we be well. May we be safe. May we live with ease. Now for the third group, try to imagine somebody difficult, somebody who maybe hurt your feelings, said something, did something. Maybe you have a little resentment towards that person. Try to imagine, bring that person to mind. May you be happy. May you be well. May you be safe. May you live with ease. And finally, all beings in all directions without exceptions. May all beings be happy. May all beings be well. May all beings be safe. May all beings live with ease. And finally, we'll dedicate the merit or benefit, fruit of our practice today towards and for all beings. May all beings be happy and peaceful, healthy and strong, safe and protected. May all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering, free from war and violence and prejudice, discrimination, racism, and may they be free from coronavirus. And may all beings find their path where insight comes and non-harming becomes obvious and clear. May all beings be free. Thank you again, everyone. So nice to practice with you. If you want to say something to the group, feel free to unmute yourself and say hello, goodbye, and I will set up some small groups for who's ever remaining.
Happy New Year.
Thank
you
you.
so
Yes.
much.
Yeah.
Bye.
Happy New Year and happy birthday tomorrow to someone.
Monica,
Okay.
tomorrow's her
Ah.
birthday.
Someone, yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Thank you, Nacho. I meant to say that. I forgot all about it. Thank you.
I'd like to say thanks very much, just because if this is the last one of the year, thank you so much for doing this, because it's been such a difficult
Yes.
year. And
Thank you, Damien.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm so grateful for that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's been
New Year to
pleasure.
you all. See you.
Feliz Navidad.
Take
Feliz
care.
Navidad.
Feliz
Feliz
Navidad.
Navidad.
Feliz Año Nuevo.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, bye, and happy birthday.
Okay, we'll see. Got a couple people.
I'm gonna stay.
Maybe we'll just leave it open. We could just.
Yeah, just leave it open, I think.
So Robert, how are things more shut down? I heard that they closed down pretty tight in England, huh?
Yeah, it's they're calling it this tier system. So 1, 2, 3, 4 is the tiers at the moment. 4 being the most strict one. So depending on which region you're in, you have more restrictions. But anyway, this